Before words, before doctrines, before creeds, there was a whisper. Not loud, not commanding, not wrapped in thunder or spectacle. A whisper, gentle, insistent, intimate, like the sound of breath in the silence of the heart. It is the whisper of the kingdom. The Urantia papers speak of the Eternal Father as the origin of all reality, the one who holds universes in his thought, yet stoops to dwell in the recesses of human minds. They remind us that before humanity named God, before prophets proclaimed, there was already an inner call, a presence more intimate than consciousness itself, a longing that cannot be silenced. The kingdom begins there, in intuition, in premonition, in the secret assurance that you have always known, even if you could not yet name what you knew. The Gospel of Thomas frames it simply: the kingdom is inside of you. Not in palaces, not in temples, not beyond the stars, but in the silent core of your being. What you search for outside has already taken residence within. The treasure is hidden not by distance, but by familiarity, not by obscurity, but by closeness. Like breath, like heartbeat, it is so near that it is often overlooked. Carl Jung called this the archetype of the self, the image of God dwelling within, shaping symbols, guiding dreams, calling us to wholeness. To awaken to this inner presence is to rediscover the axis of being, the center that holds the fragments together. The kingdom is not first a political reality, nor an institution, nor a law imposed from above. It is the archetypal memory of the soul that whispers, "You belong, you are held, you are more than shadow." The mystics of Sufism sang of the same mystery in another tongue. They call God the beloved, the one who leans close in silence, whose presence is felt more than spoken. Rumi wrote, "Listen to the silence, it has so much to say." This is the whisper of the kingdom, the inner murmur that precedes thunder, the soft pulse that outlasts all noise. Perhaps you have felt it, in a moment of stillness when distractions faded and something stirred within you. In a sunrise when beauty felt too vast to be explained. In grief when tears carried a strange sense of being accompanied. In joy when laughter seemed to open into eternity. These are not accidents, they are hints. They are the whisper of the kingdom breaking through the ordinary, reminding you of what you already know but often forget. That you are never alone, that the divine presence is closer than your own breath. This whisper cannot be silenced by time, for it does not belong to time. Empires rise and fall, doctrines change, words are debated, but the whisper continues. It is older than religion, older than history, older than language. It is the eternal call of God to the soul, inscribed in creation, etched into consciousness. It is not about proof, but about recognition. Not about argument, but about remembrance. The kingdom is not learned, it is remembered. And so the beginning of this journey is not proclamation, but listening. Before we describe, before we analyze, before we build theology or philosophy, we must return to that quiet place where the whisper can be heard. For the kingdom is not outside to be conquered, it is within to be unveiled.
If the kingdom begins as a whisper, then it is a whisper heard by all. It is not owned by a creed, confined to a people, or limited to an age. It is older than nations and churches, wider than languages and scriptures. Humanity did not invent the kingdom, it remembered it. The Urantia paper suggests that long before revelation crystallized in prophets or saviors, God had already planted fragments of himself within human minds. These adjusters, silent guides, whispered truth into the hearts of men and women who had never read a scripture, never entered a temple. This means the kingdom is not foreign to any soul. It is native, inscribed in the very structure of consciousness. To be human is to be haunted by eternity. History itself bears witness. Long before Jesus walked the hills of Galilee, sages and mystics in distant lands heard echoes of the same reality. The Hindu seers spoke of Atman, the eternal self, as one with Brahman. The Taoist masters pointed to the hidden way, invisible yet sustaining all. The shamans of indigenous traditions sang of spirits dwelling in nature and guiding human life. These were not fragments of error, but anticipations of fullness. They testify that the whisper of the kingdom has never been absent, only awaiting recognition. Carl Jung discerned this universality when he spoke of archetypes, patterns that arise again and again in myths, dreams, and stories across cultures. The archetype of the self, the inner image of wholeness, appears wherever humans seek meaning. It is the symbol of a truth that precedes explanation, that within us dwells more than ourselves. The whisper of the kingdom is this archetype made real, the eternal pressing itself into finite minds, calling us toward integration. Consider the words of Rumi, who lived centuries after Jesus, far from Palestine, yet whose poetry carries the same heartbeat. There is a voice that doesn't use words. Listen. How could a mystic of Persia, shaped by Islam, echo the voice of a Nazarene rabbi? Because the whisper is not bound by geography. It rises wherever the human soul becomes still enough to hear. And perhaps this is why so many feel a strange familiarity when encountering the message of the kingdom. It is not entirely new. It feels like recognition, like remembering something half forgotten. When Jesus proclaimed, "The kingdom of God is within you," hearts leapt because somewhere, deep down, they already knew. His words did not create the whisper, they awakened it. They put into speech what the soul had always suspected, that God was not distant, that eternity was not elsewhere, that heaven had already set its dwelling within. This intuition is universal, but it is also fragile. Noise can drown it, fear can silence it, structures of power can cover it with dogma or ideology. Yet even then, the whisper persists. It is like water underground, flowing even when the surface is dry. Generations may forget, but the soul remembers. Civilizations may collapse, but the whisper waits, patient, untiring, eternal. The Urantia papers affirm that God is no respecter of persons, that his presence seeks every heart, regardless of race, gender, or station. The kingdom then is not prize for the privileged, but inheritance of all. It does not need to be imported, it only needs to be unveiled. The whisper is the sign that it is already there. This is why religion, at its best, is not invention, but discovery. It is the attempt to name the nameless, to give language to the inexpressible, to share what has always been true. The whisper precedes religion and will outlast it. Forms may rise and fall, rituals may change, doctrines may shift, but the whisper remains unchanged. The kingdom is within you. And so before we move further in this journey, we pause to acknowledge this universality. The kingdom's whisper belongs to no one, yet calls everyone. It is not the property of prophets, though they heard it, not the possession of mystics, though they sang it, not the monopoly of churches, though they proclaimed it. It is the heritage of humanity, inscribed by the Creator into every heart.
The whisper of the kingdom may be universal, but it is never impersonal. It does not echo only in the collective history of humanity. It resounds in the secret chamber of your own soul. It is not only the story of sages and mystics, it is your story. The Urantia papers remind us that the Father does not dwell in abstractions, but in personalities. His adjuster is not a general principle scattered vaguely across the cosmos. It is a fragment of himself entrusted to you, uniquely attuned to your mind and your destiny. This means the whisper you hear is not random background noise of the universe. It is God's voice for you. It carries the intimacy of a call addressed by name, even if no audible sound breaks the air.
Think of moments in your own journey when something stirred you beyond explanation. A decision weighed on you, and beneath the swirl of arguments and fears, there was a quiet assurance pointing the way. A loss shattered your certainties, and yet in the silence after tears, you sensed that despair was not final. A moment of beauty opened your heart wider than reason could account for. These are not coincidences. They are the personal signature of the kingdom whispering in you. Jung would say this is the self pressing through the unconscious, the archetype of wholeness calling you toward integration. Yet from the perspective of revelation, it is even more. It is the eternal Father addressing you through the fragment of himself within you. The kingdom is not only a cosmic reality, it is a personal relationship. The whisper is the way eternity speaks to the finite, the infinite reaching into your daily choices, your inner dialogue, your secret longings. The Gospel of Thomas suggests this when it insists that the kingdom is inside of you. Not a vague humanity, not an anonymous crowd. You. The treasure is hidden in your field. The pearl waits in your hands. The seed is planted in your soil. To listen is not to wait for others to confirm. It is to dare to trust what your own heart already knows. The Sufis remind us that the beloved is not far. They describe God as the friend closer than vein or breath, whispering not from a distance, but from the innermost chamber. To recognize this intimacy is to realize that your deepest longing for truth, beauty, and goodness is not yours alone. It is God's longing in you. The whisper of the kingdom is not merely invitation, it is communion already begun. Yet there is risk. The whisper is gentle. It can be ignored. It does not force, it does not thunder, it does not coerce. You can drown it in noise, cover it with distraction, bury it under fear. But it will not abandon you. It waits, patiently, tenderly, until you are ready to listen again. For the kingdom is not anxious, it knows eternity. And this is why the beginning of the kingdom in you is not about striving, but about opening. It is not about building ladders to heaven, but about uncovering the heaven already planted within. To listen is to awaken. To trust is to remember. To follow is to embody what was always true. The whisper is speaking even now, not in this text alone, not in any single word or symbol, but in the stillness that lies beneath them. It is calling you, yes, you, to recognize that the kingdom is not elsewhere, not delayed, not abstract. It is alive in you, waiting to be acknowledged, longing to be lived.
The whisper of the kingdom is not meant to be admired from a distance. It is meant to be answered. It does not call only for recognition, but for response. To hear it is to stand at a threshold, invited to step into a life no longer defined by fear or distraction, but by presence, trust, and love. The Urantia papers remind us that God is both infinite and personal, beyond comprehension, yet closer than thought. The whisper is the paradox of this mystery, the eternal addressing the finite, the infinite stooping to intimacy. It is an invitation to live not only as creature, but as child, not only as wanderer, but as heir. Jung himself began his proclamation of the kingdom with this whisper made audible: "The kingdom of God is within you." His words were not mere doctrine, but a declaration of reality. They called every hearer to turn inward, to awaken to what was already true, to let the hidden treasure be revealed. To follow Jesus was never to chase an external power, but to embody an internal presence. The whisper is the seed, discipleship is the flowering.
Jung helps us grasp this in psychological terms. The self is not merely a concept, but a goal, a destiny, a call to wholeness. To ignore the whisper is to remain fragmented, divided, enslaved by ego. To heed it is to move toward integration, to become who you were always meant to be. The whisper is both compass and destination. The mystics go further still. The Sufi poets insist that the beloved waits within, longing to be recognized. They remind us that listening is itself an act of love, to give space, to turn the ear of the heart, to allow silence to speak. The kingdom is not seized by effort, but welcomed by attention. To heed the whisper is to surrender, not to weakness, but to love stronger than fear, to a presence that has always been faithful. And now the invitation turns to you. The whisper has been with you since your first breath. It has accompanied you in joy and in grief, in clarity and in confusion. It is with you now as you hear these words, not as external sound alone, but as resonance within. The kingdom does not wait elsewhere, it waits in you. The only question is whether you will pause to listen, whether you will dare to trust what you have always known. This book is not merely information, it is participation. Its purpose is not only to explain, but to awaken, not only to describe, but to invite. Each chapter will return to this single truth in different tones through different paths: consciousness, tradition, destiny, ethics, symbols, and journey. But all will converge on the same center, the whisper of the kingdom alive within. So let this be your beginning, not a beginning in abstraction, but in attention. Breathe, listen. Beneath the noise, beneath the thoughts, beneath the fears, there is presence. That presence is the kingdom. That whisper is God calling you by name. Do not postpone. Do not look elsewhere. The kingdom is not tomorrow, it is today. Not far, but near. Not outside, but within. And so the prologue ends not with an answer, but with a question whispered into your soul. Will you listen?
To speak of Jesus and the kingdom is also to speak of consciousness. For the kingdom does not arrive as external regime, nor as throne of worldly power. It dawns within the human mind, transforming perception, reorienting desire, enlarging awareness. Jesus did not only reveal truths about God, he revealed the hidden capacity of the human mind to live illumined by spirit. The Urantia papers, papers 107 through 112, describe this mystery with radical intimacy. Within every human being dwells a fragment of God himself, the thought adjuster, guiding silently, persistently toward truth, beauty, and goodness. This is not metaphor, but ontological reality. Consciousness, then, is not only the seat of reason and memory, it is the dwelling place of eternity, the theater in which spirit and matter meet. The science of consciousness cannot remain neutral when confronted with this claim, for it suggests the very structure of awareness carries divine imprint. Carl Jung sensed this in his exploration of the psyche. For him, the self, the archetype of wholeness, was not mere psychological construct, but the image of God within. Individuation, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious, was never purely clinical. It was sacred. To become whole was to move toward the self, to align with the deep center of being. In this, Jung's insight mirrors the revelation of the adjuster. Both point to an interior guide, a center that transcends ego, whispering of wholeness greater than the sum of parts. Yet Jesus did more than hint at this. He embodied it. His consciousness was not fractured, not trapped by egoic illusion. He lived fully attuned to the divine within, the adjuster in perfect harmony with human will. His life demonstrates what human consciousness is capable of when fused with spirit. He is not anomaly meant only to be admired. He is prototype meant to be followed. He revealed not only who God is, but what humanity can become when integrated with God. Modern neuroscience, surprisingly, begins to trace shadows of this mystery. Studies of contemplative practice show that silence, meditation, and prayer alter brain states, quieting fear circuits, amplifying compassion networks, strengthening attention. Experiences of transcendence are not hallucinations, but measurable shifts in awareness, often leaving subjects more resilient, generous, and open. While science cannot measure the adjuster, it can confirm that consciousness is elastic, capable of transformation beyond survival instincts. The whisper of spirit leaves footprints even in neural pathways. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz and father of logotherapy, discovered this resilience firsthand. In the midst of unimaginable suffering, he perceived that freedom remains, the freedom to choose meaning, to orient oneself toward values no prison can take away. He wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." For Frankl, consciousness was the space where meaning transcended circumstance. This resonates with the kingdom. The adjuster calls each soul to discover that life has ultimate why, not only personal but eternal. Thus, when Jesus proclaimed the kingdom, he was not proposing escape, but transformation. He was awakening consciousness to its own depth, summoning minds to expand beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond death. His teaching was a revolution of awareness. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. To enter the kingdom is to awaken consciousness to the divine already present. The whisper of the kingdom, then, is the whisper of consciousness itself, infused by spirit, pressing toward integration. It is psychology and theology, meeting science and mysticism, history and eternity embracing. To follow Jesus is not to abandon the mind, but to allow it to be illumined, healed, and expanded until thought itself becomes temple, memory becomes altar, and awareness becomes communion.
Consciousness is never neutral ground. It is the stage where two forces wrestle, the pull of ego and the whisper of spirit. The ego seeks control, security, affirmation. It builds masks, fears, defenses. Spirit, by contrast, calls to freedom, truth, surrender. Between these two, the human mind becomes battlefield and temple at once. The Urantia papers parallel 111 and 112 describe this tension vividly. The adjuster guides us upward toward eternity, while animal inheritance drags us downward toward fear, selfishness, and illusion. To live consciously is to navigate this tension, to choose daily which voice to follow. It is not weakness to feel the struggle. It is the very sign that one is alive, aware, awakening. Jung understood this dynamic through the lens of the shadow. The unconscious holds impulses and wounds we would rather ignore, yet ignoring them does not erase them. They rise in projections, addictions, conflicts. Individuation requires that we face this shadow, not to indulge it, but to integrate it. To deny the shadow is to remain fragmented. To confront and integrate it is to move closer to the self. In Jung's psychology, the shadow is not enemy, but threshold. Jesus embodied this integration perfectly. He did not live denying human weakness. He entered fully into human experience, bearing hunger, fatigue, anger, sorrow. Yet he refused to let ego dictate his course. In wilderness temptation, when offered bread, power, and glory, he chose fidelity to spirit rather than egoic satisfaction. His life was the revelation that integration is possible, human will fused with divine presence, ego surrendered but not erased, personality fulfilled rather than destroyed. This has profound implications for consciousness today. Neurobiology shows that the human brain is wired for survival first, transcendence second. Fear circuits activate faster than reason. Instinct often overwhelms reflection. Yet studies in contemplative practice reveal that awareness can be trained, ego quieted, compassion strengthened. Jesus demonstrates the end of this trajectory, not mere stress reduction, but full alignment of consciousness with spirit. He shows what happens when the adjuster is no longer resisted, but welcomed. Viktor Frankl adds another dimension. He taught that even when stripped of everything, human beings retain freedom to choose meaning. In the camps, many succumbed to despair, but some discovered an inner strength untouched by cruelty. Frankl argued that this dimension of freedom is the core of human dignity. His words resonate with the kingdom. The adjuster does not erase struggle, but offers meaning that transcends it. Consciousness fused with spirit becomes indestructible, even when everything external collapses. Here lies the invitation to see your own mind not as static machine, but as living field of decision. The whisper of the kingdom is present within you, but so too is the voice of fear, ego, and shadow. Each thought, each response, each choice becomes moment of orientation. Do you turn inward toward the whisper of eternity or outward toward the illusions of power and control? Jesus shows the path: integration, surrender, alignment. The gospel accounts describe this paradox repeatedly. He urged his followers to lose their life, to find it, to let go of ego's grasp in order to receive Spirit's gift. This was not denial of personality, but its liberation. Ego clings, Spirit frees. Ego isolates, Spirit unites. Ego seeks to dominate, Spirit longs to serve. Consciousness illumined by Spirit does not become less human, it becomes fully human, awakened, whole. The science of consciousness points to the same horizon. Researchers describe states of flow where ego recedes and awareness expands, marked by unity, timelessness, and joy. Such states leave lasting transformation. Jesus lived not moments of flow, but a life of unbroken attunement. His consciousness was not fragmented, but fused, not restless, but rooted. He is mirror of what consciousness can become when Spirit is welcomed as guide. Thus, the struggle within consciousness is not curse, but opportunity. It is the place where freedom is exercised, where eternity breaks into time. Jesus does not remove the battlefield, he transfigures it into path. In his integration, we glimpse our destiny. Ego surrendered, Spirit embraced, consciousness expanded into communion. The kingdom begins here, in the tension of mind resolved by love.
The language of Revelation speaks of the adjuster, the fragment of God dwelling within, guiding thought and shaping destiny. The language of psychology and neuroscience does not use these terms, yet it uncovers patterns that point toward the same mystery. Human consciousness is not fixed, but capable of expansion, transformation, and transcendence. Modern neuroscience has shown that the brain is plastic. Neural pathways adapt and reshape according to experience, intention, and practice. Meditation, prayer, and contemplative silence, disciplines at the heart of spiritual tradition, produce measurable changes. Regions associated with fear diminish in activity, while those tied to compassion, empathy, and attention grow stronger. The default mode network, often linked with ego-centered rumination, quiets in states of deep contemplation, allowing the sense of separation to fade into unity. In clinical language, this is alteration of brain states. In spiritual language, it is opening to the kingdom within. Psychology echoes this. William James, in his classic Varieties of Religious Experience, described mystical states marked by ineffability, unity, and transformation. These were not passing illusions, but life-altering shifts of consciousness. Contemporary studies confirm that such experiences often leave individuals more resilient, compassionate, and purpose-driven. In scientific terms, they enhance well-being. In theological terms, they reflect the adjuster's whisper breaking through the noise. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy offers another bridge. He observed that those who survived crushing circumstances did so not by clinging to power or pleasure, but by holding on to meaning. Meaning is not measurable in brain scans, yet it shapes consciousness profoundly. Frankl insisted that the human spirit is capable of rising above condition, transcending circumstance by orienting toward values. This transcendence mirrors Jesus' own teaching. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Consciousness, fused with eternal meaning, becomes invincible. Carl Jung adds a complementary lens. His work on individuation suggests that human development is not complete at adolescence, nor even at midlife. Rather, true maturity arises when one confronts the unconscious, integrates the shadow, and moves toward the self, the archetype of wholeness. Jung acknowledged that this self carries unmistakable marks of the divine. In dialogue with Urantia, we might say that individuation is the psychological description of cooperating with the adjuster's leading, of allowing the kingdom to shape the psyche into wholeness. Science also explores what are called peak experiences or flow states. In these moments, awareness expands, time seems suspended, and ego recedes. Artists, athletes, and contemplatives alike describe them as times of heightened presence, creativity, and unity. Jesus' life, seen through this lens, was not punctuated by rare peaks, but lived as a continuous flow. His awareness was unbrokenly attuned to the Father's presence. He embodied what science glimpses only in fragments, consciousness fused with eternity. What emerges is a remarkable convergence. Revelation, psychology, and neuroscience all testify, through different vocabularies, that human consciousness is not static. It can be illumined, healed, and expanded. The adjuster whispers this truth in theological terms. You are more than instinct, more than shadow, more than fear. Neuroscience confirms it. Practices of prayer and meditation reshape the brain toward compassion and peace. Psychology affirms it. Orientation toward meaning and integration leads to wholeness. Together they reveal the kingdom as lived experience of consciousness transformed. And this brings us back to Jesus. He is not only revealer of God, but revealer of humanity. In him, consciousness shows its highest potential, ego surrendered, spirit embraced, love unbroken. His life was not a departure from humanity, but its fulfillment. In him, the adjuster found perfect cooperation. In him, the kingdom became flesh, not as distant myth, but as living consciousness. Thus, to contemplate Jesus is not only to worship, but to learn. It is to glimpse what consciousness can become when guided by spirit, to recognize that the whisper within is not fantasy, but destiny. The kingdom is not elsewhere, it is the transformation of your mind here and now, into temple of the eternal.
Consciousness is the meeting ground of heaven and earth. It is fragile and finite, yet it is the doorway through which eternity enters. The Urantia Book describe it as the arena where the adjuster works, guiding thought, shaping destiny, calling each soul toward the Father. Psychology sees it as the field of struggle between ego and self. Neuroscience observes it as a network of neurons capable of rewiring itself toward compassion, peace, and transcendence. However different their vocabularies, all point to the same truth. Consciousness is not only survival, it is sanctuary. Jesus revealed this sanctuary not in theory, but in life. His consciousness was not divided, not torn between ego and spirit. He listened without resistance to the adjuster's voice, surrendering fear and illusion. In him, we glimpse the fusion of human and divine, the flowering of a mind fully illumined. The kingdom he proclaimed was not only a teaching, but a state of consciousness, expansive, compassionate, anchored in eternity. What does this mean for us? It means that consciousness is not closed. The voice you hear within, the intuition of truth, the longing for beauty, the hunger for goodness, these are not fantasies. They are the whisper of the kingdom, the adjuster guiding you toward integration. To ignore them is to shrink. To heed them is to awaken. Every act of awareness, every choice for love, every surrender of ego is a step deeper into the kingdom. Frankl's testimony adds weight here. If meaning can be found even in the abyss of suffering, then consciousness is capable of transcending circumstance. The whisper of the kingdom is not drowned by pain. It speaks precisely there, transforming anguish into offering, despair into defiance, weakness into witness. Meaning is the voice of eternity echoing in time. Jung complements this with his vision of individuation. To become whole is not to erase the shadow, but to integrate it, to bring unconscious into dialogue with consciousness, to let the self, the archetype of wholeness, guide the journey. Revelation names this self more precisely. It is the adjuster, God's own fragment shaping the soul into harmony. Individuation, then, is more than psychology. It is cooperation with the kingdom. And neuroscience gives empirical echo. It shows that prayer changes the brain, that compassion reshapes neural pathways, that silence quiets fear and opens new horizons. The kingdom is not visible to scanners, but its footprints are. The spirit leaves traces even in tissue, reminding us that consciousness is not only chemical, but sacramental. Thus, the kingdom is not distant. It is born in the quiet choice to listen, in the daily discipline of attention, in the courage to orient consciousness toward spirit. Jesus shows us what is possible when this orientation is total, a mind not enslaved by fear, but liberated by love, not fractured by ego, but integrated in God. His consciousness was not anomaly, but prototype. He reveals not only the Father, but our own future. The invitation is clear. The kingdom is not somewhere else to be found. It is within, whispering in consciousness. Listen. Trust. Allow your mind to become temple, your awareness to become altar, your thoughts to become prayer. In this, you enter the kingdom not as dream or abstraction, but as lived reality. Consciousness, illumined by spirit, becomes the place where eternity begins. And so the whisper is for you. The kingdom lives in you, waiting to be unveiled.
Every culture has raised its gaze to the heavens, seeking meaning beyond the visible horizon. Every people, through myth, ritual, and teaching, has intuited that reality cannot be reduced to matter alone. Religion, in all its forms, is the human attempt to voice this intuition, to reach for the eternal with words and symbols. Some of these voices are poetic, others are philosophical, still others ritualistic. But beneath the diversity lies the same ache, the same longing. The Urantia papers describe this search as a testimony that the Father has never left humanity without witness. While no tradition is complete in itself, each carries fragments of light, glimpses of truth, rays of the kingdom. The prophets of Israel, the sages of India, the mystics of China, the visionaries of Persia, all touched the hem of eternity. They did not yet know the fullness, but they bore seeds of it. In Jesus, these seeds found fulfillment, not by erasing their roots, but by flowering into plenitude. Jesus himself did not despise the religions of the world. He recognized their efforts as genuine, their wisdom as partial reflections of the eternal. His mission was not to abolish, but to fulfill, not to silence, but to harmonize. Where others saw division, Jew versus Gentile, East versus West, he saw threads of a single tapestry. His proclamation of the kingdom was universal because it resonated with truths already whispered across cultures. Consider the teachings of Buddha, who spoke of the middle path, avoiding extremes of indulgence and denial. His wisdom was not foreign to the kingdom Jesus announced, for both point toward liberation from the tyranny of ego, toward compassion as a way of life. Consider Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, revealing himself as divine avatar descending to guide humanity. His vision finds echo in Jesus, who embodied the Word made flesh, the divine presence in human form. Consider Lao Tzu, who described the Tao as invisible, ineffable, yet present in all things. Jesus too spoke of the kingdom as reality unseen, yet transforming, like leaven hidden in the dough. Consider Zoroaster, who proclaimed the Asha, truth, order, righteousness, as the cosmic law to which humans must align. Jesus brought this to fulfillment in the call to love God and neighbor, the highest expression of divine order.
This is not to conflate traditions as though they were identical, but to honor their convergences. Each carries accents of the eternal, shaped by culture and history. The Urantia papers remind us that God has always spoken in the language of each people, sending teachers of truth to prepare the way. In this sense, Jesus is not contradiction, but culmination. He does not erase Buddha's compassion, Krishna's descent, Lao Tzu's Tao, or Zoroaster's Asha. He embodies them, transcends them, integrates them. He is not one among many paths, but the living synthesis, the word that fulfills all words. This universality is crucial today. In a world fractured by borders, ideologies, and religious divisions, the kingdom speaks a language deeper than doctrine. It invites us to recognize truth wherever it appears, to bow in reverence before any sincere glimpse of eternity. To follow Jesus, then, is not to retreat into exclusivism, but to expand into universality. It is to see Buddha's compassion as echo of the kingdom, Krishna's song as foreshadowing, Lao Tzu's silence as prelude, Zoroaster's Asha as fragment. And so the kingdom is not new invention but unveiled presence. It is the fulfillment of ancient longings, the answer to prayers spoken in temples, forests, deserts, and mountaintops across the ages. It whispers, all truth belongs to God, all light converges in Christ.
When the Buddha walked the dusty roads of India, he carried no weapons, sought no thrones, claimed no worldly crown. His mission was to reveal the end of suffering, the liberation that arises when desire loosens its grip and illusion is pierced. His teaching of the middle way, a path between indulgence and ascetic denial, resonates with timeless wisdom, balance, mindfulness, compassion. Humanity does not find salvation in extremes, but in the clarity that emerges when consciousness becomes free. Jesus, centuries later, stood upon the hills of Galilee and spoke of the kingdom in words equally simple, equally revolutionary. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity here is not ritual cleansing nor social status. It is the transparency of awareness freed from ego's distortions. In both Buddha and Jesus, we encounter a call to freedom. Not the freedom of external circumstances, but the liberation of the mind and heart from chains within. The Buddha called it nirvana, the extinction of craving. Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven, the indwelling presence of the Father. Different languages, yet both pointing to the same horizon of liberation. Both also placed compassion at the center. The Buddhist path was inseparable from Karuna, the deep empathy for all beings caught in the wheel of suffering. Jesus, too, embodied this compassion, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, welcoming the marginalized. He announced a kingdom where mercy is not weakness but power, where love is not sentiment but law. The adjusters in Urantia's revelation and the bodhisattva vow of Buddhism converge here. Consciousness aligned with spirit overflows in compassion, naturally, irresistibly. Turning to Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, we find another voice echoing across the centuries. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna despairs, overwhelmed by conflict. Krishna reveals himself as divine presence incarnate, the eternal taking form to guide the human. His message is that duty, surrendered to the divine, becomes worship, that the battlefield of life is not meaningless chaos, but stage for union with God. Whenever there is decline in righteousness, I manifest myself. Jesus, too, manifested in history, not on a battlefield of armies, but in the struggles of conscience, in the brokenness of a world exiled by rebellion. His incarnation reveals not only that God visits humanity, but that God lives within humanity. Where Krishna appeared as avatar, descending to re-establish order,
Jesus came as Son of Man, revealing that the eternal and the temporal can be fused forever in one consciousness. He was not only messenger of God, he was God's message embodied. Both Krishna and Jesus teach surrender, not passive resignation, but active alignment. Krishna counseled Arjuna to act without attachment, offering the fruits of labor to the divine. Jesus echoed the same when he prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." Both reveal that freedom lies not in clinging to outcomes, but in surrendering to the higher order of love and truth. Urantia's description of the adjuster enriches this parallel. The divine fragment does not descend in isolated avatars only, but in every human being, whispering daily, calling to alignment. In Jesus, we see the perfect union of human and adjuster. In Krishna, we glimpse the archetype of divine descent. Together, they testify, the eternal does not remain distant. The eternal enters time, enters consciousness, enters even the silence of your own heart. Thus, the teachings of Buddha and Krishna do not diminish the kingdom proclaimed by Jesus. They prepare its soil, sketch its outlines, sing its preludes. Jesus does not replace them, but brings their intuitions to fulfillment. Where Buddha announced liberation, Jesus reveals its source, the Father within. Where Krishna embodied divine descent, Jesus discloses its destiny, the union of God and humanity, not for some, but for all.
The kingdom, then, is not alien to Asia's wisdom. It is its flowering. It is the fullness of what Buddha intuited in compassion, what Krishna revealed in descent, what seekers have always longed for, consciousness transfigured by spirit, life lived as communion with the eternal. Far from Galilee, in the valleys and mountains of ancient China, Lao Tzu composed words that would echo through millennia. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. His voice was quiet, his teaching paradoxical, yet his inside profound. He perceived that the ultimate reality flows silently like water, nourishing all things without striving, guiding without forcing. The Tao is hidden, intangible, yet everywhere. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, his words carried resonance with this same mystery. The kingdom does not come with observation, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Like the Tao, the kingdom cannot be reduced to definitions or systems. It is not imposed by power, not visible in spectacle, not bound by politics. It is a presence, subtle yet transforming, silent yet irresistible. The Tao flows through all things. The kingdom grows like seed in hidden soil. Both summon us to humility, to trust in the invisible more than in appearances. Urantia deepens this connection. The adjuster, fragment of God within, works silently, never coercing, always guiding. Its action resembles the Tao, gentle, patient, unhurried, shaping destiny without force. To live in the kingdom is to align with this inner flow, to trust that surrender is stronger than control, that yielding to the Father's will is the highest form of freedom. Jesus himself embodied this Tao-like presence, refusing to dominate, choosing instead to serve, to wash feet, to embrace children. His sovereignty was hidden, yet absolute. Meanwhile, in the fire temples of ancient Persia, Zoroaster proclaimed a vision equally cosmic, the Asha, the truth, order, and righteousness that uphold the universe. Asha is not merely morality,
but alignment with reality itself, the structure of existence governed by divine wisdom. To live in falsehood, in druj, is to live against the grain of the cosmos. To live in asha is to dwell in harmony with creation and with God. Jesus echoed this cosmic alignment when he declared, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness." Righteousness here is not legalistic rigor, but asha, the harmony of will and reality, of inner truth and cosmic order. His life was the perfect embodiment of asha, his words truthful, his deeds aligned with love, his will surrendered to the Father. He revealed that the kingdom is not escape from the world, but its rightful alignment, its healing, its transfiguration. Urantia affirms that such order is not abstract, but personal. The adjuster draws each human being into alignment, into asha, written not only in stars, but in hearts. The cosmos is structured in truth, and the soul is invited to harmonize with it. Jesus lived this harmony so perfectly that even those outside his tradition recognized it. His very being radiated the balance Lao Tzu described, the order Zoroaster proclaimed, the kingdom he himself announced. Thus, the wisdom of Lao Tzu and Zoroaster meets in him. From the east, the Tao whispers of the invisible flow. From Persia, Asha proclaims the order of truth. Jesus reveals both as facets of the same kingdom, the same eternal presence. He is the living Tao, walking gently yet powerfully. He is the incarnation of Asha, truth embodied in action. In him, paradox and order, silence and clarity, invisibility and revelation converge. For the seeker today, these voices invite reverence. To live the kingdom is to walk like water, gentle yet strong, yielding yet enduring. To live the kingdom is to align with asha, truthful in word, righteous in action, harmonious in being. These are not foreign virtues, but universal. They belong not to one culture, but to every soul. And so, the kingdom appears again as universal language, whispered in Chinese poetry, sung in Persian fire, fulfilled in Galilean fields. Jesus is not alien to these traditions. He is their fulfillment, their center, their flowering. The Tao becomes flesh in him. Asha becomes love in him. And the kingdom reveals itself as the eternal thread binding east and west, heaven and earth, silence and song.
When we gaze across the vast landscape of human spirituality, we see rivers flowing from many mountains, each with its own path, each nourishing fields along the way. Some are gentle, others tumultuous. Some run in silence, others thunder with power. Yet all rivers share the same destiny, the ocean. In Jesus, the rivers of world traditions find their confluence. He is not one current among others. He is the sea toward which all waters move. Buddha called humanity to awaken from illusion and to cultivate compassion. Krishna revealed that the divine does not remain distant, but descends to guide and uplift. Lao Tzu pointed toward the Tao, hidden yet present, flowing invisibly through all things. Zoroaster proclaimed Asha, the cosmic order of truth and righteousness. Each voice carries a fragment, each vision a ray of the eternal light. Jesus brings these fragments into wholeness, these rays into fullness, not by replacing, but by fulfilling.
The Urantia papers emphasize this continuity. Revelation is progressive, unfolding in stages, with each religion preparing humanity for deeper truth. The prophets of old, the sages of East and West, the mystics of every culture, none labored in vain. Their words were seeds planted in human soil. In Jesus, the seeds blossom, revealing not only the Father above, but the Father within. The kingdom, he announced, is not sectarian possession. It is universal inheritance. This universality does not mean uniformity. The kingdom does not erase cultural richness, but transfigures it. The compassion of Buddha is affirmed, yet it is deepened by the revelation of the Father's personal love. The avatar of Krishna is honored, yet it is surpassed by the union of God and humanity in the Son of Man. The Tao of Lao Tzu flows still, but in Jesus, it takes flesh, walking among us. The Asha of Zoroaster remains, but in Jesus it is crowned by love, not only order, but mercy. What emerges is a vision of unity without reduction. Jesus is not competitor of these traditions, but their fulfillment. He is not an alternative path, but the hidden center they were all circling. To encounter him is not to despise the wisdom of the world, but to see it in new light, to recognize that its truths were preparing the soul for his arrival. The kingdom is the grammar that allows all traditions to be translated, the horizon where all longings converge. And so, the kingdom is not monopoly of any creed. It whispers in the silence of Zen, glows in the fire of Persia, sings in the hymns of India, breathes in the poetry of China, prays in the Psalms of Israel. Jesus reveals that these whispers belong not to separate gods, but to the one Father of all. The adjuster within every human being confirms this. The divine speaks in every heart, across every boundary. For the secret today, this means liberation from fear of difference. To honor the wisdom of other paths is not betrayal, but fidelity. To recognize Buddha's compassion or Lao Tzu's Tao as rays of truth is to confess the greatness of God, whose light no culture can contain. Jesus does not shrink this light into exclusivity. He expands it into universality. The kingdom is not fortress, but horizon, not boundary, but invitation. In the end, the wisdom of traditions reminds us that truth is never foreign. Wherever we encounter love, justice, humility, compassion, there the kingdom is already present. And in Jesus, we recognize the fullness of that presence, the embodiment of what all traditions longed for, the union of God and humanity, the word that gathers all words, the ocean where every river finds its home.
To contemplate Jesus merely as a historical teacher is to see only the surface of a vast ocean. His words, actions, and compassion are luminous, yet beneath them lies a depth that touches the fabric of creation itself. The Urantia papers remind us that Jesus, known in the universe as Michael of Nebadon, did not come to Urantia simply to heal wounds of one people in one century. He came as culmination of an eternal plan, the final chapter of his 7 self-bestowals, each one a descent into the reality of his creation, each one an act of solidarity with beings he came to save. Paper 119 describes this mystery in sweeping scope. Michael chose to know his universe not as distant sovereign, but as participant, to live the lives of his creatures from the lowest to the highest. These bestowals were not tests for his own sake, but revelations for ours, showing that divinity does not reign from isolation, but from shared experience. And the last of these bestowals, in the humble life of Jesus on Urantia, unveiled the full truth. God is not only above the cosmos, he is within it. He does not rule from cold distance, but from intimate nearness. Here lies the beginning of a cosmic vision.
The kingdom Jesus proclaimed is not confined to Galilee's villages or Judea's deserts. It is cosmic destiny, the flowering of a universe-long story. When he spoke of the Father's house with many mansions, he hinted at realities stretching far beyond earth, worlds of ascent, realms of education, dimensions where mortal souls awaken into greater light. The Urantia papers describe these as the mansion worlds, steps of an eternal journey from the dust of time into the courts of eternity. The incarnation of Jesus reveals not only God's love for humanity, but God's intention for creation itself. Teilhard de Chardin would later describe this mystery as the omega point, the future toward which the whole universe converges, drawn by the magnetic presence of Christ. Urantia reveals that this is not metaphor but reality. All evolution, physical and spiritual, is oriented toward union with God, and Jesus is the revelation of that destiny made flesh. To see him in this light is to recognize that history and cosmology are intertwined. The same power that spins galaxies also speaks in parables. The same logos through whom all things were made knelt to wash feet. The self-bestowal of Michael on Urantia is the cosmic signature that nothing in creation is beneath God's love. The Creator himself walked among his creatures, not only to reveal, but to share, to dignify, to sanctify their journey. This changes how we understand the kingdom. It is not escape from the world, but fulfillment of creation. It is not consolation prize for the weak, but the purpose for which galaxies burn and time unfolds. The cosmos itself is pregnant with destiny, and Jesus is its unveiling. His life is not isolated episode, but axis of the universe, the moment when eternity entered time fully, when the Creator fused with creation to lift it into glory. And so when Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is at hand," his words vibrated far beyond Palestine. They were cosmic in scope. They meant that the long trajectory of evolution, the yearning of prophets and sages, the labor of stars and atoms had reached its revelation. The kingdom is not abstraction, but destiny. Destiny not only for you, not only for humanity, but for galaxies, for universes, for the very fabric of creation. To contemplate Jesus is to contemplate our own future. His self-bestowal reveals the truth. Consciousness is eternal, love is ultimate, and destiny is union with God. This is the science of stars and the poetry of faith, the logic of Urantia and the hope of Teilhard, the promise of Christ who is both man of Nazareth and Lord of Nebadon.
Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit paleontologist and mystic, gazed upon the unfolding of the cosmos with both scientific wonder and theological reverence. He saw evolution not as blind mechanism, but as pilgrimage. For him, the history of the universe, from the first particles of matter through the birth of stars to the rise of life and consciousness, was not random wandering, but directed movement. Evolution, Teilhard believed, is driven by spirit, and its ultimate trajectory points towards Christ, the omega point, where all lines converge. The Urantia papers illuminate this intuition with startling detail. Paper 119 recounts how Michael of Nebadon chose to descend into his creation through 7 self-bestowals, culminating in the life of Jesus on Urantia. These were not random acts of humility, but cosmic milestones, revealing that the Creator himself participates in the journey of his creatures. Teilhard's Omega and Urantia's narrative meet in the same vision. The universe is not meaningless flux, but purposeful story, and its climax is Christ. Teilhard described Christ as both Alpha and Omega. Alpha as the creative source through whom all things arise, Omega as the final magnet drawing all things into unity. Jesus embodies this paradox. He is the Word at the beginning. Through him all things were made, and he is the destiny towards which the universe evolves, that God may be all in all. In him, the cosmos finds both its origin and its end. For Teilhard, the Omega is not external imposition, but inner attraction. Matter itself carries within it the seed of spirit, a pull towards greater complexity,
consciousness, and communion. Evolution, then, is the gradual unveiling of spirit through matter. This aligns profoundly with Urantia's teaching of the adjuster. Every human being carries within a fragment of the divine, urging them upward, pressing them toward integration and eventual fusion. The universe is not pushed from behind, but drawn forward by love. Here Jesus stands as revelation of what this attraction means in flesh and blood. His life shows not only where evolution is going, but what it looks like when fulfilled. A consciousness fully fused with spirit, a personality in complete harmony with God, a human being who reveals divinity not by domination, but by love. Teilhard imagined the Omega as universal Christ gathering all into himself. Urantia confirms the Son of Man is indeed the center of the universe of Nebadon, the sovereign whose incarnation makes him forever united with his creation. This cosmic vision reframes how we see history. The rise of civilizations, the progress of science, the growth of compassion, all are not accidents, but threads in a larger tapestry. Teilhard argued that the noosphere, the sphere of human thought and consciousness, was gradually enveloping the planet, preparing humanity for a leap into greater unity. In Urantia, this is echoed by the idea that mortals ascend through worlds of training, expanding awareness until they reach the presence of God Himself. Both visions point to consciousness as vehicle of destiny and Christ as its horizon. The hope this offers is immense. If the universe itself is evolving towards Christ, then despair is never final. Even the failures of history, the darkness of rebellion, the wounds of war, cannot derail the trajectory of love. Teilhard insisted that suffering and struggle are not wasted. They were transformed in the movement towards Omega. Urantia agrees. Rebellion delays but cannot defeat destiny. The adjuster within continues to call. The sun continues to reign. The cosmos continues to unfold towards the kingdom without end. Thus, Teilhard's scientific mysticism and Urantia's revelation converge on a single point. Jesus is not only teacher of Galilee, but cosmic destiny of creation. He is the fulfillment of evolution, the center of consciousness, the future already present. To follow him is not merely to imitate moral example, it is to align with the very current of the cosmos, to let one's life be drawn into the flow that carries galaxies, atoms, and souls into unity with God.
When astronomers turn their instruments to the heavens, they do not see stillness but motion. Galaxies spiral, stars ignite and die. Space itself expands. Since the discovery of cosmic expansion, humanity has realized that the universe is not a static backdrop, but a dynamic story, moving toward futures we can scarcely imagine. Science describes this expansion with equations and observations. Spirituality perceives in it a parable of the soul's journey. The Urantia papers present a vision that resonates profoundly with this cosmological unfolding. Life on worlds like Urantia is but the first step of an infinite ascent. Death is not an end, but a passage. Beyond lies the mansion worlds, realms of learning, healing, and growth, where souls awaken to continue their journey. Just as the universe expands outward, so too does human destiny expand beyond the limits of earthly life, moving from one stage of being to another, into ever wider circles of light. Science and revelation, when held together, unveil a breathtaking symmetry. Cosmology tells us that the universe began in unimaginable density and has been unfolding for billions of years, creating the conditions for consciousness to arise. Urantia tells us that consciousness itself is destined to unfold, to expand through ages and spheres until it reaches the presence of God. The outer cosmos and the inner soul are parallel journeys, both evolving toward fullness. Teilhard de Chardin's vision helps bridge this. He saw evolution not only in biology,
but in consciousness, moving from atoms to life, from life to mind, from mind to spirit. For him, the universe itself was converging toward Omega, toward Christ as center and destiny. Urantia confirms this with detail. Mortals ascend through the local universes, superuniverses, and finally Havona, until they stand before the Father. Expansion is not only spatial, but personal, not only cosmic, but spiritual. Jesus embodies the guarantee of this destiny. By his self-bestowal, the creator of Nebadon forever united himself with his creatures. He became one of us, ensuring that no gulf remains unbridgeable, no exile permanent. His resurrection is not only personal triumph, but cosmic promise. Consciousness survives death, love transcends matter, destiny is assured. As the galaxies expand, so too does the horizon of human hope, stretching beyond stars into eternity. The mansion worlds described in Urantia are stages of transformation. Souls awaken there to new realities, shedding the scars of mortal limitation, learning the laws of higher life, gradually integrating the divine fragment within. Each stage is like a new orbit, broader and more luminous, carrying the soul closer to the center of all things. What science sees in galaxies receding into infinite space, revelation assures in souls advancing into infinite spirit. Both are journeys of expansion, one material, one spiritual, both guided by the same Creator. This perspective transforms how we see our place in the cosmos. We are not isolated sparks on a small planet, doomed to fade when the body fails. We are participants in an immense story, as vast as galaxies and as intimate as breath. Our consciousness is designed to outgrow mortality, to enter into the expansion of the universe itself. Jesus' words, "In my Father's house are many mansions," become not metaphor, but roadmap, promise of a future more vast than science has yet conceived. Modern cosmology often inspires both awe and anxiety. The immensity of space, the inevitability of entropy, the fragility of life, these can overwhelm. Yet Urantia's vision infuses hope. The expansion is not meaningless, but purposeful. Just as galaxies move outward, souls move inward toward God. Entropy may claim stars, but spirit ascends untouched. Death may silence bodies, but consciousness is reawakened in light. Thus, the expansion of the universe becomes symbol and sacrament. Each galaxy receding into distance is reminder that destiny lies ahead, not behind. Each star born in stellar nurseries is metaphor of the soul awakening in higher realms. The cosmos is not alien to faith, but its stage, its canvas, its hymn. And Jesus, the Christ of Nebadon, is both the painter and the song, the guarantee that every soul, like every galaxy, is moving toward the eternal center.
The story of creation is not yet finished. Stars continue to be born, galaxies still drift into greater distances. Consciousness awakens anew in each generation. Evolution, whether physical, biological, or spiritual, is an unfinished symphony. And in its unfolding, the figure of Jesus stands as both center and horizon, Alpha and Omega, the one through whom all things arise and toward whom all things converge. The Urantia papers declare that Michael of Nebadon, through his 7 self-bestowals, entered into the very fabric of his creation. He did not remain sovereign, aloof, but chose to participate, to walk with his creatures, to taste their struggles, to sanctify their paths. In his final incarnation as Jesus of Nazareth, the Creator fused with creation irrevocably. This was not temporary descent, but eternal union. God bound himself to humanity and humanity to God. In him, destiny is revealed not as distant abstraction, but as living presence. Teilhard de Chardin envisioned the universe itself moving toward what he called the Omega point,
an ultimate convergence where matter, life, and consciousness are gathered into unity in Christ. This was not speculation born of faith alone, it was intuition born of scientific awe. Teilhard saw in the unfolding complexity of the cosmos a signpost of spirit's attraction, love drawing all things toward their center. Urantia confirms and deepens this vision. The ascension plan, the mansion worlds, the progression through universes, all testify that evolution has spiritual direction, and its name is Jesus. Cosmology today tells us that the universe is vast beyond comprehension, expanding still, a dance of galaxies and dark energy. It humbles us with its immensity and apparent indifference. Yet Revelation insists this immensity is not meaningless. Expansion itself becomes parable of hope. Just as galaxies recede into greater space, so do souls advance into greater light. Just as stars are born and die, so does consciousness pass through stages, shedding forms but never extinguished, always carried forward by the adjuster, always drawn upward by the Christ. The kingdom Jesus proclaimed, then, is not confined to inner piety or earthly reform, though it includes both. It is cosmic in scope, destiny of universes, fulfillment of creation's long yearning. To follow him is not simply to walk moral path, but to align with the very trajectory of the cosmos. His life, death, and resurrection are not isolated events, but cosmic signatures. Eternity entered time. Love conquered fear. Destiny was revealed as communion. This vision is not meant to intoxicate us with abstraction, but to ground us in hope. If the cosmos itself is moving toward Christ, then every act of love participates in destiny. Every gesture of compassion resonates with cosmic harmony. Every surrender of ego to spirit is echo of galaxies expanding toward light. To live the kingdom is to live in step with the universe itself, to align with its deepest current, to trust that all is moving toward fullness in God. And so, the invitation of Jesus becomes a cosmic call. He is not only Rabbi of Galilee, but Lord of Nebadon. His words are not only sermons, but revelations of the structure of reality. His kingdom is not only spiritual refuge, but the destiny of galaxies, the fulfillment of Teilhard's Omega, the completion of Urantia's vision. To say, "Your kingdom come," is to pray for the final harmony of universes, for the consummation of love as law of creation. The cosmic destiny, then, is not speculation, it is a promise. It is the meaning inscribed in stars and souls alike. All shall be gathered, all shall be healed, all shall be fulfilled in Him who walked with us, who still walks within us, who awaits us at the center of eternity.
Hope is often misunderstood as fragile optimism, a wish whispered against the noise of despair. Yet, in the teachings of Jesus, hope is not fragile. It is force, power, ethic. It does not wait passively for the world to improve. It acts, serves, builds. Hope is not naive dream, but revolutionary practice, the seed of transformation sown into daily life. The Urantia papers describe the kingdom not as institution or government, but as fraternity, the lived experience of souls recognizing one another as children of the same Father. In this vision, spirituality cannot be reduced to private escape or ritual piety. To be in the kingdom is to enter community where dignity is honored, compassion becomes law, and justice is love's form in public life. Jesus embodied this fraternity in ways both radical and ordinary. He welcomed children, women, the sick, foreigners, sinners, those society excluded. He inverted hierarchies, teaching that greatness lies in service, not domination. He announced that the first shall be last and the last first, not as rhetorical flourish, but as divine logic. For him, the kingdom was never abstraction. It was enacted in meals shared,
wounds healed, burdens carried. Hope became visible in his actions, tangible in his presence. This is what distinguishes the kingdom from mere utopia. Utopia imagines distant future. The kingdom begins now, wherever compassion is enacted, wherever justice is lived. Hope, in Jesus' ethic, is not projection into tomorrow, but fidelity in today. It is washing feet, feeding hungry, forgiving enemies. It is small yet immense, ordinary yet cosmic. Each act of service becomes sacrament, each gesture of love a fragment of eternity breaking into time. The ethical force of this vision is immense. To live by the ethic of hope is to resist despair and cynicism, the twin poisons of the age. Cynicism insists that nothing changes. Despair whispers that nothing matters. Jesus answers both. Everything can change because God is present. Everything matters because love is eternal. His hope is not denial of suffering, but defiance of it, insistence that even in darkness, light has already dawned. Gandhi would later embody this same ethic through ahimsa, non-violence, as active force, not passivity. He called it truth force, satyagraha, the power of love to disarm hatred, the strength of hope to transform injustice. Gandhi did not know Urantia's revelation, yet he lived its ethic. The kingdom is fraternity enacted through service and courage, not conquest. Martin Luther King Jr. echoed this when he declared, "I have a dream." His dream was not escape from history, but transformation within it, a vision of fraternity where children of all races sit together at the same table. His hope was profoundly ethical, grounded in Jesus' vision of the kingdom. He refused despair because he believed history bends toward justice, because love is stronger than hate, because the kingdom is not distant promise, but present possibility. Emmanuel Levinas adds philosophical depth to this ethic of hope. He insisted that the face of the other is the most urgent revelation of responsibility. To encounter another person is already to hear a command, "You shall not kill." For Levinas, ethics arise not from rules, but from encounter. Responsibility is not chosen, but imposed by the reality of the other's vulnerability. In this, Levinas' philosophy resonates with Jesus' vision. The kingdom is not doctrine alone, but response to the neighbor, the stranger, the enemy. The face of the other becomes altar, and hope becomes action. Thus, the ethic of hope is not sentimental, it is demanding. It requires that we serve rather than dominate, forgive rather than retaliate, include rather than exclude. It calls us to see the divine fragment in every person, to treat them not as object, but as brother, sister, reflection of God. The Urantia papers confirm this with clarity. The kingdom is fraternity, and fraternity is lived ethic of hope. This is the revolution Jesus inaugurated, not with swords or decrees, but with bread broken, feet washed, lives healed. Hope, for him, was not abstract virtue, but daily liturgy. It is still so today. Whenever we serve, whenever we choose justice over indifference, whenever we embody compassion, we make the kingdom visible. Hope becomes flesh again.
If the kingdom of God is fraternity, then its power is not in domination, but in love expressed through justice and service. Few figures in modern history embodied this more visibly than Mohandas K. Gandhi. Though he did not claim to follow Urantia's revelation, his life bore the imprint of its ethic: hope as active resistance, compassion as strategy, truth as weapon. At the heart of Gandhi's vision was ahimsa, non-violence. Too often misunderstood as passivity, ahimsa is in fact a form of power, a force capable of confronting empires and dismantling oppression.
Gandhi described it as truth force, or satyagraha, the conviction that love and truth are stronger than violence and falsehood. Violence may coerce, but only non-violence transforms. Coercion imposes obedience. Compassion awakens conscience. This ethic resonates deeply with the kingdom as described in the Urantia Papers. Jesus taught his followers not to resist evil with evil, but to overcome it with good. He did not preach cowardice but courage. Courage to confront injustice without becoming its mirror, to face hatred without letting it corrode the heart. The ethic of the kingdom is service, not retaliation, transformation, not vengeance. Gandhi recognized this and turned it into practice against colonial injustice. In his campaigns for Indian independence, Gandhi mobilized millions without swords or guns. He taught that every act of non-cooperation with injustice was seed of liberation. To refuse to buy unjustly taxed salt, to weave one's own cloth rather than depend on exploitative trade, to march peacefully in the face of violence, these became sacraments of hope. Each act declared, the oppressor cannot command conscience, cannot extinguish truth, cannot define destiny. Here Gandhi stands as witness to the living power of the kingdom's ethic. He may not have spoken of the fatherhood of God and the fraternity of man in Urantian terms, but his life embodied the same truth, that humanity is united not by domination, but by service, that justice is achieved not through violence, but through compassion disciplined into action. Jesus himself lived this ethic in Galilee. He refused to take up arms against Rome, even when pressured by zealots. He taught his followers to love enemies, not because enemies deserve love, but because hatred perpetuates chains of violence. To love an enemy is not to condone injustice, but to break its logic. It is to create new possibility, to interrupt cycles of retaliation. Gandhi's ahimsa is precisely this interruption, a historical application of the kingdom's ethic. The resonance between them is striking. Gandhi declared, "An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind." Jesus said, "If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." Both statements reject the mathematics of vengeance and replace it with the calculus of hope. Violence narrows possibilities, love expands them. But ahimsa is not naive idealism. Gandhi endured imprisonment, humiliation, and violence, yet persisted. He knew nonviolence does not prevent suffering, it transforms its meaning. Suffering endured for truth becomes testimony, not defeat. This is profoundly Christ-like. Jesus too accepted suffering, not as passive victimhood, but as active fidelity, love carried to the end. His cross, like Gandhi's marches, revealed that weakness before power may hide strength deeper than violence can touch. The ethic of hope is demanding precisely because it is creative. To respond violently is easy. To endure without hatred, to resist without destroying, requires strength of spirit. Gandhi trained his followers in this discipline, teaching them to absorb blows without retaliation, to remain faithful to truth in the face of lies. This is the same discipline Jesus demanded, to love neighbor and enemy alike, to forgive 70 times 7, to live as salt and light in the world. The kingdom as fraternity is not distant utopia, but embodied ethic. Gandhi's life demonstrates how it can confront injustice in history. His nonviolence is not foreign to Jesus, but parallel, a sign that the ethic of the kingdom belongs to no one culture, no one creed, but to humanity itself. Where love is chosen over hate, truth over falsehood, service over domination, there the kingdom breathes.
If Gandhi showed the power of nonviolence to dismantle empires, Martin Luther King Jr. revealed its force to heal nations. Standing in the heart of America's racial wounds, he dreamed not of vengeance, but of fraternity. His dream was not naive poetry, but prophetic vision, that the kingdom of God could break into history, that justice and love could reshape society, that hope could be written into laws and lived in neighborhoods. King was steeped in the gospel. For him, Jesus was not distant figure of ancient devotion, but living standard for social transformation. He read the Sermon on the Mount not as pious counsel, but as political manifesto. Blessed are the peacemakers,
love your enemies, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. These were not spiritual niceties, but strategies of revolution, ethics strong enough to challenge segregation, racism, and violence. The Urantia Papers describe the kingdom as fraternity, and King embodied this. He insisted that humanity is one family, that the color of skin cannot divide children of the same father. His marches were liturgies of hope, his speeches homilies of the kingdom, his dream an echo of Jesus' proclamation that all are welcome at the Father's table. Hope for King was never passive. It was not waiting for oppressors to change, but confronting injustice with courage rooted in love. He declared that justice too long delayed is justice denied. Yet he rejected hatred as means of struggle. He called for soul force, the same truth force Gandhi wielded, the same ethic Jesus embodied. For King, love was not weakness, but weapon, sharper than swords, stronger than bullets. In this, his vision aligned with Urantia's cosmic perspective. The adjuster within calls every human being toward dignity, and the kingdom becomes visible when societies honor that dignity. Segregation was not merely political flaw, it was spiritual heresy, denial of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. To fight segregation was to serve the kingdom, to reveal in public what Jesus revealed in private. Every soul is precious. Every person carries fragment of the divine. King's dream was profoundly eschatological. He envisioned a future where justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. But he also insisted that this future begins now, in choices made today. This mirrors Jesus' teaching. The kingdom is both already and not yet, present in hearts and communities where love reigns, yet still awaiting fulfillment in history. Hope lives in this tension, confident in ultimate destiny, committed to immediate action. King's ethic was also profoundly costly. He endured arrests, threats, humiliation, and finally martyrdom. Like Jesus, he bore suffering not as defeat, but as testimony. His blood, like Christ's, became seed of transformation, echo of the kingdom. He knew that love might not always protect from violence, but it would always outlast it. His life proclaimed that hope stronger than hatred, justice stronger than oppression, love stronger than death. Levinas helps us interpret King's dream philosophically. For Levinas, the face of the other demands response. We are never free from responsibility once we encounter another person's vulnerability. King saw the face of the black child denied education, the face of the mother turned away from restaurants, the face of the worker denied dignity. Each face was altar, each cry was divine summons. His movement was not only civil rights struggle, but liturgy of ethics, a refusal to ignore the divine appeal of the other. Thus, King stands as modern prophet of the kingdom. His dream was not American alone. It was human, cosmic, divine. It was the kingdom of God clothed in political urgency, hope refusing despair, love refusing hate. His voice still calls. To believe in Jesus is to dream with him, to live as though the kingdom is real, to embody hope until justice and love prevail.
The kingdom that Jesus proclaimed is not abstraction suspended in heaven, but ethic embodied on earth. It is fraternity that becomes visible wherever one human being looks into the eyes of another and recognizes sacredness. It is justice, not only in systems, but in faces, not only in ideas, but in encounters. Here the thought of Emmanuel Levinas provides striking resonance. For Levinas, the face of the other is revelation more powerful than doctrine. To meet another person is already to hear command, "You shall not kill." The vulnerability of the other is summons to responsibility, appeal that cannot be ignored.
Ethics, then, is not chosen but imposed by encounter itself. Jesus embodied this vision long before philosophy gave it language. He looked at the faces others overlooked, the leper shunned, the sinner condemned, the child dismissed, the woman silenced. In each, he saw not obstacle but revelation. His ethic was not abstract law, but concrete encounter. The kingdom lived wherever he met eyes with another soul and called them brother, sister, beloved. His gaze was sacrament of hope. Levinas teaches that the other's face is doorway to infinity, for it opens us to responsibility without limit. Urantia describes this in parallel. Every human being carries the divine fragment within, the adjuster whispering of eternity. To meet another is to meet not only mortal fragility, but immortal potential. To stand before mystery of God, reflected in eyes of neighbor. Hope becomes more than dream, it becomes obligation. This ethic of hope, therefore, is radical. It refuses reduction of persons to numbers, roles, or categories. It insists that justice begins not with law, but with recognition, not with power, but with compassion. The kingdom's ethic is not satisfied with distant ideals, it demands action in the immediacy of encounter. Hope is thus never escapist. It is fire that burns in the presence of injustice, refusing to let indifference reign. It is courage that sees the stranger not as threat, but as teacher, the enemy not as void, but as possibility of reconciliation. It is the gaze that says, I am responsible for you, because God is responsible for both of us. In Gandhi's nonviolence, in King's dream, and in Levinas's philosophy, we see echoes of this ethic. Hope is not luxury, but duty. Jesus revealed this first and fully. His kingdom is not distant utopia, but lived responsibility, enacted whenever one person chooses love over indifference, service over domination, forgiveness over vengeance. The Urantia papers affirm this. The kingdom is fraternity, and fraternity is ethical practice. It is a world where justice is love applied to society, where hope becomes transformation. In the kingdom, worship cannot be separated from service, and spirituality cannot be divorced from justice. To believe is to act, to hope is to serve, to love is to transform. And so the call remains. The ethic of hope is not suggestion, but command, not ornament, but foundation. It demands that we look into the faces around us, friend, stranger, enemy, and recognize in each the silent appeal of the divine. The kingdom is born there, in the gaze returned, in the responsibility accepted, in the hope embodied. Jesus reveals that God's dream for the world is not only salvation of souls, but healing of relationships, not only ascent to eternity, but transformation of history. The ethic of hope is the bridge. To live it is to make the kingdom visible, here and now, in acts of justice, service, and love that ripple outward into eternity.
Words can explain, but symbols reveal. Doctrines can define, but images awaken. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God, he did not choose complicated arguments or abstract philosophies. He told stories. A sower casting seed, a woman hiding leaven in flour, a man finding treasure in a field, a shepherd searching for his lost sheep. Such simple images carried the weight of eternity. The Urantia papers 151 to 152 explain that Jesus deliberately chose parables because they invite discovery. A parable does not impose truth, it plants it. It does not hand answers to the listener, but awakens their own intuition. For this reason, parables are living language, growing with each generation. Children understand them in one way.
scholars in another, mystics in yet another, yet none exhaust their meaning. They are windows to the kingdom that open wider the more we gaze through them. Jesus understood the power of symbol. He knew that the deepest truths cannot be reduced to formulas or confined to rigid categories. Truth must be experienced, not dissected. Symbols allow truth to speak directly to the soul, bypassing resistance of intellect and defenses of ego. A parable does not argue, it resonates. It enters imagination like seed enters soil, quietly germinating until one day it blossoms into understanding. This is why the parables remain universal. Across cultures and centuries, people know what it means to sow seed, to bake bread, to search for treasure, to lose and find what is precious. The imagery is ordinary, but the meaning is infinite. As Mircea Eliade would later describe, such symbols are hierophanies, manifestations of the sacred within the everyday. A loaf of bread is no longer only bread, it becomes sign of invisible leaven, presence of divine power working silently in the world. The parable of the mustard seed, for instance, carries archetypal depth. A tiny seed grows into a great tree where birds of the air find shelter. On the surface, it is image of growth. Beneath, it is symbol of potential hidden within the small, of eternity contained in the fragile. Joseph Campbell, in his studies of myth, emphasized that myths and symbols speak to the collective unconscious, touching patterns older than history. The mustard seed is one such archetype, the hidden spark destined to unfold into fullness. Jesus' genius was to translate cosmic truths into accessible stories without diminishing their depth. He was not simplifying to make the message easier, he was revealing it in its most powerful form. To say that the kingdom is like seed, leaven, or treasure is to express mystery in language anyone can understand, yet no one can exhaust. It is to give every generation keys that open new doors without ever locking the truth in rigid formulas. Urantia emphasizes that these parables were more than illustrations, they were revelations. They carried within them the structure of reality itself. The kingdom is not external institution, but hidden presence, already at work like yeast in dough. It is not imposed by force, but grows quietly like seed. It is not always obvious, but once discovered is worth everything like treasure in a field. The parables reveal the kingdom's nature as dynamic, hidden, transformative, priceless. The power of symbol also lies in its ability to cross boundaries. Doctrines divide, but symbols unite. Theological systems may fracture communities, but a story of seed and harvest resonates in every heart. Even those outside Christianity can hear these parables and feel their truth. They belong not only to one faith, but to humanity. They are eternal archetypes, bridges between cultures, reminders that the language of God is written in images, not arguments. Thus, the choice of Jesus to speak in parables was itself an act of hope and inclusivity. He entrusted truth to imagination so it could travel farther than words, last longer than dogmas, reach deeper than logic. The kingdom in his teaching is not imposed upon the mind, but discovered by the heart, revealed through images that never age. The language of symbols, then, is not accessory to his message, it is his message. To speak of God as Father, life as seed, destiny as treasure, is to confess that the eternal is present in the ordinary, the infinite in the small, the kingdom in the hidden.
Joseph Campbell, in his lifelong exploration of myth, affirm that myths are not lies or primitive stories, but the deepest language of the human soul. They are maps of meaning, narratives that express the universal structures of human experience. A myth, in Campbell's sense, is not meant to be analyzed like a scientific formula, but lived, entered, and felt. It speaks not primarily to the intellect, but to the imagination, the heart, and the unconscious. When Jesus told parables, he was speaking mythically. He was not offering entertainment, but disclosing mystery. Each story contained universal motifs: the search for what is lost, the joy of discovery, the tension between hidden and revealed, the transformation of the small into the great. These are archetypal patterns, instantly recognizable in countless traditions, resonant across ages. Campbell described the monomyth, the hero's journey, as the path all humans must walk: departure, initiation, return. In the parables of Jesus, we see micro-journeys that mirror this universal cycle. The treasure hidden in the field requires departure, initiation, and return. The lost sheep echoes the hero's journey as well. The shepherd departs into danger, suffers loss, finds, and returns in joy. These parables are compact myths, carrying the same resonance as epic tales, but distilled into everyday imagery. Why does this matter? Because Campbell shows us that myth is the most direct way to reach the human heart. We do not simply understand myths, we live them. They awaken recognition in us. This is my story too. When Jesus speaks of the prodigal son, he is not describing only one family in ancient Palestine. He is telling the story of every human being who leaves home, experiences exile, longs for return, and discovers unconditional love. It is both historical tale and archetypal journey. Campbell also emphasized that myths point beyond themselves. They are not ends, but signs of transcendence. A myth, he said, is transparent to the transcendent. When we enter it, we glimpse realities larger than ourselves. The parables of Jesus function the same way. They are simple enough to be remembered, but deep enough to open toward infinity. To hear of the pearl of great price is to glimpse value that transcends this world. To hear of leaven in dough is to feel mystery of invisible transformation. Each parable is window, transparent to eternity. The Urantia papers confirm this dynamic. They describe how Jesus deliberately avoided rigid definitions of the kingdom because such definitions would age, be corrupted, or become divisive. Instead, he chose stories, ensuring the kingdom would always be rediscovered anew. Stories are alive, doctrines calcify. Campbell would agree. Myth endures because it adapts, because it speaks in symbols that never lose power. We see then that Jesus stood not only as prophet or teacher, but as myth-maker of the highest order. His stories are not accidental teaching devices, but masterpieces of symbolic imagination. They condense the cosmic drama into the smallest gestures: a seed falling into earth, a lamp shining in darkness, a father embracing his son. In these moments, myth and truth converge, and perhaps this explains their staying power. Doctrinal formulations of the early church have shifted, fractured, and divided communities, but the parables remain. A child can hear them and be moved. A mystic can meditate on them for a lifetime and never exhaust their depth. A scholar can compare them with global myths and still discover fresh resonance. The parables endure because they are myth, and myth is eternal language of the soul. Campbell once wrote that a myth is a mask of eternity, a form through which the infinite reveals itself. The parables of Jesus are exactly this: masks of eternity, simple enough for farmers and fishermen, yet luminous enough to reveal the face of God. To enter them is to participate in the kingdom, to feel eternity breathing within time.
Mircea Eliade, the historian of religions, taught that the sacred does not only appear in temples or rituals, but manifests through symbols and gestures within ordinary life. He called these hierophanies, revelations of the divine woven into the fabric of the everyday. A stone, a tree, a river, a simple act may become a doorway into eternity. The parables of Jesus operate precisely in this logic. He did not rely on distant abstractions or elaborate theories, but on symbols drawn from daily life: the field, the leaven, the lamp, the lost coin, the fisherman's net. At first glance, they seem ordinary scenes, but under closer attention, they open as windows to ultimate reality. The Urantia Book confirms this deliberate choice, papers 151 to 152. Jesus knew that the kingdom of God should never be trapped in rigid definitions. That is why he spoke in images drawn from common life, easy to remember, yet impossible to exhaust. When he said that the kingdom is like leaven hidden in flour, everyone knew what it meant to prepare bread. But few grasped immediately the depth of the mystery. The invisible transforms the visible. The small permeates the whole. The silent revolutionizes in secret. This is the very structure of a hierophany. Take the parable of the hidden treasure. A man discovers treasure buried in a field and, filled with joy, sells everything to possess it. On the surface, it appears as a clever bargain. Symbolically, however, it is revelation. The supreme value is concealed, veiled beneath the surface of life, demanding radical surrender in order to gain all. Eliade would remind us that the hidden treasure is an archetype found in myths and folktales across cultures, always sign of the sacred hidden in the ordinary, requiring search and sacrifice to attain. The parable of the leaven reveals another layer. The woman, mixing yeast into flour, embodies an alchemical mystery, the invisible working within matter, transformation from the inside out. Eliade would call this a domestic hierophany. In the kitchen, in the act of preparing bread, the eternal manifests. Ordinary life becomes a temple. The kingdom is not distant, but alive in what seems trivial. Even the parable of the sower, with seeds falling on different soils, manifests cosmic patterns. The seed is a universal image of hidden life, of death that leads to resurrection, of potential contained in the small. When it falls on good ground, it produces abundantly. The lesson is not merely moral, but cosmic. The kingdom is a vital process, present in every cycle of sowing and harvest, in every silent transformation of nature. Eliade argued that symbols are eternal because they belong not only to history, but to mythic time. When Jesus used symbols, he inscribed the kingdom into this universal register. Harvest, leaven, the search for treasure, these were already part of human imagination, present in myths of countless cultures. In his words, they became hierophanies of the kingdom, reminders that the eternal has always been present in the everyday. This is why his parables never age. Humanity changes, cultures evolve, but people still sow fields, bake bread, lose and find what is precious. The ordinary endures, and with it, the symbols endure. Each time someone hears these parables, they may recognize that what seems common is in fact sacrament of divine presence. The Urantia papers emphasize that Jesus viewed the entire world as a living classroom of the kingdom. He did not separate the sacred from the profane. Every detail of life was opportunity to reveal the Father. In this sense, Eliade would see in Jesus the perfect realization of the principle of hierophany. All things may become revelation when seen with the eyes of faith.
To understand the parables as hierophanies is to rediscover the heart of Jesus' spirituality. The kingdom is not confined to dogmas or temples. It is present in bread broken, in the cultivated field, in the hidden treasure. Every human act can become symbol. Every moment can become altar. Life itself can be read as parable.
If Joseph Campbell revealed the mythic dimension of parables, and Eliade their hierophanic depth, the Hermetic and alchemical traditions unveil another resonance: parables as codes of inner transformation. For the alchemist, ordinary matter is not inert but alive, containing hidden potential for transmutation. Lead can become gold, darkness can yield light, mortality can open to immortality. Symbols in this worldview are not merely teaching devices, but keys, doorways to processes of spiritual alchemy. The Urantia papers describe the kingdom as inner transformation, a hidden power that works silently yet irresistibly. This is precisely the structure of the parables. Consider the leaven, invisible, small, yet capable of transforming the entire loaf. This is an alchemical image of the soul, an agent of change hidden within, awakening matter to spirit. In Hermetic language, it is the inner fire that transmutes the base into the divine. The parable of the seed carries similar weight. The seed must fall into the earth and die to bear fruit. To the casual hearer, this is agricultural truth. To the mystic, it is spiritual formula. Death is not end, but transformation. Burial, not annihilation, but gestation. The alchemists spoke of negredo, the dark stage of dissolution, where the old self decays so that new life may emerge. In this light, the parable is not moral counsel, but initiation into the rhythm of spiritual rebirth. The hidden treasure and the pearl of great price also resonate with Hermetic motifs. The treasure is not lying on the surface, it is buried, concealed, requiring search, risk, and radical sacrifice. In alchemical texts, the philosopher's stone is always hidden, veiled in symbols, requiring perseverance to attain. The parable mirrors this pattern. The kingdom is discovered only by those willing to surrender all. The treasure, like the stone, is not external possession, but inner realization. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, also finds echo in Jesus' teaching. His parables reveal how the kingdom of heaven is reflected in earthly processes: growth, fermentation, discovery, reconciliation. What is visible mirrors what is invisible. The rhythms of nature disclose patterns of spirit. The farmer's field, the baker's oven, the fisherman's net, each is microcosm of macrocosm, earthly symbol of cosmic truth. The Hermetic tradition also insisted that symbols protect mystery. The language of allegory and metaphor was not accidental, but deliberate concealment, ensuring that only the prepared could penetrate the truth. Jesus himself acknowledged this dynamic. According to the Urantia papers, he used parables so that seekers would find while the indifferent would pass by. A parable cannot be memorized into truth. It must be lived into. It conceals as much as it reveals, guarding the sacred until the heart is ready. What is striking is that the parables carry all the structure of alchemical texts, but in simpler form. They speak of transformation through hidden process, of value concealed beneath appearance, of growth through death, of union achieved through surrender. They are blueprints for the soul's journey. To meditate on them is to enter the laboratory of the spirit, where ordinary life becomes materia prima and the kingdom is the gold that emerges. Hermetic and alchemical readers would also recognize in Jesus' parables the rhythm of unity. The many become one, the dough becomes one bread, the scattered seeds yield one harvest, the lost sheep is restored to the flock, the prodigal son is returned to the family. This is the alchemical conjunctio, the sacred union that reconciles opposites. The kingdom is not fragmentation, but wholeness, not isolation, but communion. In this sense, the parables are not only messages of hope, but practices of transformation. To hear them is to be invited into alchemy of the heart. They teach that the divine spark is already present within, that the eternal is hidden in the temporal, that the kingdom is within and among us, waiting to be unveiled through surrender, patience, and love. Thus, Jesus stands not only as teacher of morality, but as master of symbols, whose parables embody the universal structure of transformation. They are hierophantes, myths, alchemical formulas, layers of revelation for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. And they remain alive because they speak to the eternal human condition, the longing for treasure, the hope of growth, the courage to die in order to live.
At the end of his earthly mission, Jesus left behind not an institution, not a monument, not a book, but an experience, the lived reality of the kingdom of God within. The Urantia Papers, 196, describe this as the central truth of his life, that faith is the pathway, love the atmosphere, and communion with the Father the essence of human destiny. Jesus did not simply point to the kingdom, he embodied it, showing that its reality is immediate and universal, accessible to every heart willing to believe. The kingdom, as he revealed, is not bound by geography or history. It is not here or there, not the property of priesthoods or empires, not reducible to creeds or dogmas. It is the presence of God alive in the soul, the quiet companionship of the Father with each of his children. Jesus lived this truth so fully that he became its radiant testimony, showing that eternal life does not begin after death, but in the moment when the soul awakens to the indwelling Spirit. Paper 196 highlights that the greatness of Jesus was not only in his teaching, but in his faith. He trusted the Father absolutely, even when circumstances were dark and uncertain. His faith was not naive optimism, but deep assurance born of constant communion. He knew the Father's will as personal and intimate, not abstract or distant. And he invited others into this same experience, insisting that the kingdom was not for the few, but for all who dared to open themselves. This inner reality was revolutionary because it shifted the axis of religion. No longer would God be sought primarily through ritual, sacrifice, or mediation. Now he could be known directly in the secret place of the heart. This was the scandal of his message, that the infinite could dwell in the finite, that the eternal could be found within the temporal, that the human soul was itself temple of the Most High. For the disciples, this meant freedom. They were no longer prisoners of fear, bound by rules or crushed by guilt. They were children of God, liberated by presence. The kingdom, once conceived as future apocalypse, became present reality. Wherever love was lived, wherever faith awakened, wherever service revealed the Father's heart, the kingdom was there. Urantia affirms that this was Jesus' supreme gift, the demonstration of a life fully lived in God. He revealed what it means for the human to be wholly open to the divine, for the finite to become transparent to the infinite. His humanity was not diminished by divinity, nor divinity diluted by humanity. Rather, in him they converged, showing what is possible when faith is lived without reserve. This is the invitation that endures. The kingdom is not past memory, not postponed destiny, but living presence now. Each soul is called to awaken to the adjuster within, to recognize that God already abides in the hidden chambers of the heart. Each life can become, as his was, a testimony of love, faith, and hope.
The question, then, is not whether the kingdom exists, but whether we will allow it to exist in us. Will we enter the silence and hear its whisper? Will we trust the Father enough to surrender fear? Will we live as though eternity has already begun? Because in truth, it has. Jesus' life answers yes. The kingdom is everlasting because it is rooted in God, who is eternal. But it becomes real in us when we embrace it, when we choose faith over fear, communion over isolation, love over indifference. To do so is to continue his mission, to let the God who walked with him now walk with us.
In one of the most luminous sayings of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus declares, "The kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that you are children of the living Father." This affirmation carries the essence of his message. The kingdom is not foreign territory to be conquered, but hidden treasure already within, waiting to be discovered. The journey is not outward conquest, but inward unveiling. The Urantia papers echo this mystery, affirming that the adjuster dwells within each human soul as a fragment of the eternal Father. This divine presence is not metaphor, but reality, the anchor of our destiny and the source of our transformation. To recognize it is to awaken to our true identity, not as isolated beings struggling for meaning, but as beloved children called to union with the infinite. Theosophy would later call this reality the Christ within, the inner logos, the spark of divinity awaiting activation. For its thinkers, the external Christ of history points to the internal Christ of experience. This is not to diminish Jesus' uniqueness, but to extend his mission universally. What he lived perfectly, each soul is invited to embody partially, progressively, until union is complete. The mystics of every tradition intuited the same truth. The Sufis spoke of the beloved who dwells in the heart, whispering in silence. The Hindus sang of the Atman as divine self, identical in essence with Brahman. The Buddhists described the Buddha nature latent in every being. Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart proclaim that the birth of Christ in Bethlehem means nothing unless he is also born in the soul. Across cultures and centuries, the testimony converges. The kingdom is not distant, but interior, the divine presence already alive within. This universality does not dilute Jesus' message, it amplifies it. It shows that what he revealed on Urantia resonates with the deepest longings of humanity everywhere. His voice joins the chorus of the world's wisdom, yet with singular clarity. The Father is personal, intimate, loving, and present within. The kingdom is not a distant ideal, but an everlasting invitation to awaken to this presence and embody it in daily life. The call is radical because it refuses excuses. If the kingdom were external, we could blame absence of temples, teachers, or rituals. But if it is within, the responsibility rests with us. We are summoned to silence, to introspection, to courage, the courage to face ourselves and discover that beneath layers of fear, shame, and distraction lies the radiance of God. The treasure is buried in the field of our own being. The pearl is hidden in the depths of our own soul. The Urantia Book insists that Jesus' greatest gift was not only the revelation of the Father's love, but the assurance that this love is immediate, personal, and indwelling. Faith, then, is not assent to dogma, but trust in presence. To believe is to dare to live as though the kingdom is real, already now, already here, already within. The mystical traditions remind us that this presence must be embodied. It is not enough to know intellectually that God dwells within. We must incarnate this truth in gestures of compassion, forgiveness, and service. The kingdom becomes visible when it is lived. In the words of Rumi, "Don't get lost in your head. The secret of secrets is inside you, ready to flow into action." Thus, the invitation is universal, but also deeply personal.
The kingdom is everlasting not because it waits for us after death, but because it is already seated within, immortal and unquenchable. Our task is to awaken, to surrender, to embody. Jesus points the way, the mystics echo it, the Spirit confirms it. The kingdom is in you, now, always, forever.
At the close of this journey, words must turn into witness. Ideas, however luminous, cannot replace embodiment. The kingdom of God is not meant to remain in books, in doctrines, or in the pages of this very work. It longs to live in you, through you, as you. This is the final summons. Do not look elsewhere. Do not wait for signs in the sky. Do not postpone for tomorrow what eternity has already placed in your hands today. The kingdom is not promise deferred, but reality present. It is the flame already burning in your heart, the treasure already buried in your soul, the whisper already calling your name. To embrace it is to awaken to your deepest truth, to stand as child of the living Father, luminous and free. The Urantia Papers insist that Jesus did not merely teach faith, he lived it. His life was the revelation. Every gesture, every silence, every act of compassion was embodiment of the kingdom. And this is what he entrusts to each of us, not to repeat his words mechanically, but to continue his life in our own. The kingdom lives wherever his Spirit finds new expression in human hearts. The Gospel of Thomas reminds us that self-knowledge is the key. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known. To know oneself in this light is not vanity, but vocation. It is to discover that the true self is not ego, but soul, not shadow, but light, not isolation, but communion. To awaken to this is to realize that the kingdom is not external prize, but inner birthright. The mystical traditions converge on this same point. Theosophy calls it the Christ within. Rumi calls it the beloved in the heart. Teresa speaks of the castle where the king waits. Jung describes it as the self drawing all fragments toward wholeness. Urantia proclaims it as the adjuster whispering eternity into time. All voices join in one chorus. The kingdom is in you, awaiting recognition. The invitation, however, is not passive. To discover the kingdom is to live differently. It is to become witness of love in a world of indifference, beacon of hope in a culture of despair, servant of justice in a landscape of division. It is to embody what Jesus embodied: gentleness without weakness, courage without violence, truth without arrogance, faith without fear. The kingdom is not theory but practice, not concept but incarnation. This book ends, but the journey does not. The everlasting kingdom is not concluded by final pages, nor contained in human words. It continues wherever you walk, wherever you dare to embody love, wherever you choose trust over cynicism, service over selfishness, forgiveness over resentment. The kingdom breathes when you breathe, acts when you act, shines when you let its light radiate through you. Do not imagine this task is for saints alone. It is for you. For every soul reading these words, the invitation is personal and direct. You are temple. You are vessel. You are carrier of the divine spark. The everlasting kingdom lives in you, not someday, not elsewhere, but now. So let this be the final blessing. Go forth, not as seeker of distant heavens, but as bearer of the kingdom already alive within. Let your life become parable, your heart become temple, your every act become sacrament. For the God who walked with Jesus walks now with you. The kingdom has come. The kingdom is coming. The kingdom will never end.